Okay, I think we'll get started. Welcome, everybody. We appreciate you participating in today's webinar. I am Tara King, a Senior Project Director at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS for short. AAAS is the world's largest general science association and the publisher of the science family of journals. I serve as the Center Coordinator of the AAAS S-STEM Resource and Evaluation Center, which is abbreviated as the S-STEM REC. We're happy to facilitate this opportunity for you to ask NSF S-STEM program directors questions about the S-STEM solicitation as you prepare your proposal submission, which is due on March 3rd. Joining us today are Tom Kim and Mike Ferrara, who are co-leads of the NSF S-STEM program. The AAAS S-STEM REC is thankful for our ongoing partnership with Tom and Mike to serve the S-STEM community. Next slide. Before we jump in, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. Please feel free to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar. It's never too early to do so. Use the Q&A feature, which you can find on the bottom of your screen, to type in your questions. In addition, we have enabled upvoting. So if you see a question that aligns with something you're thinking about, or a question that you'd also like to hear the answer to, please give it a thumbs up. We'll prioritize getting answers to questions that have the most upvotes first. One other note on the Q&A feature, our NSF colleagues may answer some of the more straightforward questions in writing, so please keep an eye on not only the open questions tab, but the answered questions tab as well. The slides being presented today can be found on the AAAS S-STEM REC website. If you'd like to follow along, you can download them right now. We'll put the website link to the chat. Actually, my colleague Rachel already did. Also, a recording of today's webinar will be posted on our website when it becomes available. We're pleased to have 2 American Sign Language interpreters joining us today. In addition, we're pleased to have a live transcriptioner providing closed captioning. Our thanks to these individuals for helping us make the information presented in today's webinar more widely accessible. We hope everything runs smoothly for you, but if you have any technical difficulties or questions, contact my colleague Rachel Stivers in the chat or send her an email. Finally, we'd really appreciate your feedback on today's webinar. We'd like to know how useful it was for you, any suggestions you have to improve it. A short survey will appear when you leave the webinar, and if you're unable to take it upon exiting today, a link to the survey will be emailed to you tomorrow. We thank you so much in advance for sharing your thoughts with us to help us improve our offerings. Next slide. For those just joining us, hello and welcome. My name is Tara King, and I'm the Center Coordinator of the AAAS S-STEM Resource and Evaluation Center. I'm thrilled to facilitate this proposal preparation webinar as part of the S-STEM REC's work, which is made possible by funding from the National Science Foundation. Let me provide a quick overview of today's agenda. We'll do a quick snapshot of the AAAS S-STEM Resource and Evaluation Center and direct you to resources that may be helpful as you prepare your S-STEM proposal submission. Then I'll hand things over to Tom Kim, lead of the NSF S-STEM program, to highlight important information in the current S-STEM solicitation. After that, we'll spend the bulk of our time together discussing your questions with Tom Kim and Mike Ferrara, who are the NSF S-STEM co-lead program directors. Remember to use the Q&A function to ask your questions. You could type them in at any time. You can also upvote other folks' questions. We'll prioritize getting those addressed that are upvoted the most, and we'll do our best to get through all of the questions you asked today. Tom and Mike will be writing responses to some of the more direct questions in the Q&A tab as well, So keep an eye on both the answered and open question tabs. Next slide. So let's get started by giving a brief intro to the AAAS S-STEM REC. Thanks, my colleague Rachel put the link to our website in the chat. The management of the REC was awarded to AAAS in October 2022 through a competitive NSF proposal process. And overall, the REC promotes effective strategies and practices to increase the number of talented, low-income students who obtain degrees and careers in STEM. The REC works across multiple levels to accomplish this goal. For instance, we support the effectiveness of the S-STEM portfolio through publishing S-STEM outcomes and impacts reports. We build the capacity of current and prospective S-STEM grantees through webinars like this one. And we support S-STEM scholars' STEM persistence and professional development through convening an in-person annual meeting just for scholars. We welcome you to visit our website to learn more. Next slide. While the REC is managed by AAAS in coordination with NSF, we could not reach our goals without the significant contributions of our full team, which includes our partner organizations listed on this slide. Next slide. One of our partner organizations, MN Associates, Inc., provides evaluation and research capacity building opportunities for the S-STEM community. We'd like to make you aware of a set of complimentary webinars that M&A will be hosting in February on the topics of developing research and evaluation plans and using a logic model or theory of change. We encourage you to check these out. Thank you for posting links in the chat already. Also, M&A has created a useful guidebook on preparing research and evaluation plans for NSF S-STEM grant proposals, as well as repositories of tools and measures related to evidence-based practices. Please download and explore these resources. Additionally, you can reach out to M&A with your specific evaluation planning questions using a request form. We'll also post a link to that form in the chat. And just note that we are promoting consultations with M&A as they are a REC partner. However, this does not constitute endorsement of M&A as evaluators by the National Science Foundation. Next slide. Today's webinar is the second in a series we're hosting. You're welcome to join any of the REC's upcoming offerings. Our two webinars in February will have a slightly different format than the one we're hosting today. They'll include insights from a panel of current S-STEM PIs. On February 3rd, our panel discussion will focus on supporting scholars at community colleges. And on February 9th, the focus will be on supporting graduate level scholars. See the links in the chat to register and for more information about these. Next slide. And finally, as you prepare your S-STEM grant proposal, the following NSF resources provide essential guidance. These include the full text of the current solicitation, a recording of an overview webinar that explains the solicitation requirements in detail, and an FAQ document that answers the most commonly asked questions about the solicitation. Please visit all three of these resources, and we have provided the links to them in the chat. Next slide. Now it's my pleasure to pass things over to NSF S-STEM Program Lead, Tom Kim, to highlight important details of the current S-STEM solicitation. Tom?
Thanks, Tara. Welcome, everybody, and hopefully this will be an educational process for all of you. You're all here because of the S-STEM program, and tracks 1, 2, and 3 all have a deadline forthcoming on March 3rd of this calendar year, so just about 6 weeks away. Next slide, please. So just a quick synopsis of some changes that were made recently. This is solicitation 25-514, which is a revision from the 24 solicitation, and some of the changes made are still standing as that solicitation is still active. We did not publish a new solicitation for FY26. Collaborative planning grants are no longer accepted. And track one was in this past iteration elevated to $2 million for maximum award with a slightly different formulation of scholarship budgeting. 50% of the total budget for track one must be allocated to scholarships, unlike track two and three. Evaluation models must be included as a supplementary document. They should not be placed in the project description. Same with the data table summarizing the pool of potential scholars. Please insert that as a supplementary document rather than incorporating it into your project description. Next slide. In past years, there have been additional changes. Just a reminder, the maximum scholarship amount per year per scholar is $15,000 at the undergraduate level and $20,000 at the graduate level. The maximum duration for any individual degree program is 5 years. You should calculate scholarships based on students' unmet need, and this should be up to the maximum allowable. So $15,000 for an undergraduate is the maximum. That is the most any individual students can accept as a scholarship. However, if their unmet need is less than that, you should fund it up to that unmet need level. You should have letters of commitment from your financial aid offices that they are willing to do the determination of low income and eligibility and calculation of scholarship amounts. And your project viability, and this circles back to the scholar data tables that go in the supplementary materials, you should demonstrate that you have comparable numbers of eligible students enrolled in disciplines and degree programs. All right, next slide. Um, the S-STEM program is a congressionally mandated program directed to advancing the success of academically talented, low-income students in STEM with demonstrated financial need. There is no predisposition towards any particular STEM discipline. However, you should have clarity as to whether or not your disciplines are declared as STEM eligible. If it is not one of the canonical STEM disciplines, please contact Mike or me to get a weigh-in as to whether or not your program meets the eligibility criteria. You should also incorporate in your proposal curricular and co-curricular activities to support the S-STEM scholars because the money itself is insufficient to warrant success for the scholars. And the solicitation specifies cohort building and faculty mentoring as supports. You should aim to increase retention and graduation of these low-income students. Those are the benchmarks of success. And you should also strive to test strategies that are systematically gleaned to support scholars in the attainment of their goals. Okay, and so once again, uh, this is a workforce development, and so career pathways in STEM should align with your institutional context and resources. And ultimately, you should disseminate findings to the broader community. Next slide. Okay. Once again, as I said before, the benchmark is attainment of degree, and that is either associate's, baccalaureate, or graduate degree. Also, at the associate level, transfer to a baccalaureate from an associate's program, even if they don't attain the associate's degree, is a valid metric of success. Similarly, advancement from an undergraduate to a graduate degree program also counts as reaching a benchmark for a scholar. Next slide. Okay, we encourage you to use data to substantiate the fact that you have an appropriate number of scholars and that you have the structures in place to support them. You should document and validate that you have partnerships across departments and other institutional entities. And you should build on your institutional strengths. S-STEM is not here to basically provide you with everything you need. It is basically here to catalyze the opportunities that you have available to leverage maximum success for your scholars. Next slide. Okay, so common requirements for tracks 1, 2, and 3. You should have a literature review, or you can also incorporate empirical pilot data to basically substantiate the activities that you propose to incorporate as part of your project. Okay. You must have faculty mentors. Okay. However, And in addition, you should have student cohorting development activities. These have been demonstrated to be highly successful for the populations in question. However, you cannot make the scholarships a contingent requirement here. Scholarships cannot have the additional criterion besides the five stipulated in the solicitation. Okay, you can incentivize them to the best of your ability, but you cannot mandate that they do these things. You should also have a clear and specific evaluation plan. Your evaluator must be external to the project. That does not mean that they have to be external to the institution. Next slide, please. So for track one, as I said before, you can budget up to $2 million for a maximum award duration of 6 years. 50% of the budget must be devoted to scholarships. Unlike tracks two and three, we expect that you will actually not award scholarships in the first year. There is a planning period, and I'll discuss that on the next slide. Single institutions of higher education that have not had active funding from the S-STEM program or the STEP program in the last 5 years are eligible for track one. So regardless of when a project started, if it ended anytime within the last 5 years, your institution is not eligible for track one. The PI, and this is common across the board, the PI should be a STEM faculty member currently teaching in one of the eligible disciplines being supported by the proposal. Uh, if they are not serving as the PI, a STEM administrator should also be part of the project leadership team. Faculty members from all academic units involved in the award should be lined up to serve as mentors, and they can be either co-PIs or senior personnel, or simply listed in the proposal as mentors specifically. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, track one has a specific requirement. There is an initial planning period in which you would not be awarding scholarships. This is an opportunity for you to build your institutional capacity so that you are ready to more faithfully execute the scholarship part of your project once this planning has been done. You should document your planning in a 4-page supplemental document titled Track One Planning, and this should outline the activities that your institution will undertake to be better able to serve the needs of the scholars and the project. And that is why track one only requires that 50% of the money go to scholarships. That 10% difference is to provide some supplemental funding for the institution to implement these planning activities. Next slide, please. All right. Track two, which is the mainstay of the program, which is where we get the lion's share of our proposal submissions. Similar eligibility criteria, single institutions. If you're focused on transfer between institutional levels, you can have a partnership. However, the money only goes so far, so you want to be mindful of the scope of what you're attempting to do. As before, the PI must be a STEM faculty member in one of the disciplines being supported. And similarly, a STEM administrator, if they are not the PI, also needs to be on the leadership team. Faculty members from all of the departments must be lined up to be serving as mentors, and their situation in the proposal is the same as in track one. Next slide. Okay, so tracks one and two are what we call scholarship intensive, which is to say that formal research activities are not required. However, there is a knowledge generation expectation, and that is hopefully going to be accomplished through a robust evaluation plan for your project. Okay, and so make sure that you attend to the sorts of questions that you want to ask about your project and its viability, and what lessons can be learned and disseminated to the broader S-STEM community. Next slide. Okay, track three is a $5 million maximum request for up to 6 years, and similarly, 60% of this budget must be allocated to scholarships, same as in track two. These are multi-institutional collaborations that focus on a common interest or problem. They should include strong and mutually beneficial collaboration across all of the institutions. And the PI of a track three has a slightly different set of requirements or expectations. They can be one of the following: a faculty member teaching in one of the STEM eligible disciplines being supported, or they can be a STEM administrator, or they can be a researcher whose expertise is in institutional, educational, or social science research. Next slide. So the difference here is that for track three, we are expecting these projects to engage in high quality research to advance our understanding of how to adapt, implement, and scale up effective programming practices to foster positive outcomes for scholars. This research should be led by a senior personnel co-PI or PI who is qualified to do research in a social science or educational research context. They should not be the external evaluator. Those need to be disentangled and should be supported by different individuals on the project. We do not have any particular preferences with regard to theoretical frameworks or methodologies that are being used in these programs because every institutional context and every project research question is going to be different. So there is no single silver bullet solution to how you want to approach your research questions. Um, that being said, next slide. That's a quick synopsis of the program. Thank you for your attention, and I think we are now going to migrate to Q&A.
That's right. Thank you, Tom. We'll also spotlight our colleague Mike Ferrara as well to help answer questions. Um, so yeah, please continue to add your questions in the Q&A box and continue to upvote questions that have been asked. Well, and also I see that Mike has already answered a few. So if you go to the answer tab, you'll see where the written responses to answered questions are. So please check both the open tab and the answer tab. So let's start with this question for Tom and Mike. Um, Someone asks, I have questions about what is allowable for student eligibility. I know there are restrictions regarding the Supreme Court decision from a few years ago, but I'm wondering about things like school report cards, given that it has to do with educational preparation. Thoughts on this question?
So so there are the baseline, as Tom laid out, there are the baseline requirements to be eligible, right? So you need to meet the institutional definition of low income. You need to be a citizen, permanent resident, or admitted refugee. And you need to be in one of the degree programs that the proposal says will receive scholarships. After that, the criteria need to solely be about the academic talent and or potential of the applicants. Okay, so report cards can speak to their preparation, their academic talent, how they performed in their general courses and their STEM courses. That's absolutely fine. Membership in a specific group is not a measure of talent. Interest in a specific sub-discipline of your discipline that you're looking to scholarship is not a measure of talent. Tom spoke to, interest in particular components of the project is not a measure of talent. So you need to work with your team to think about what information do you need to try to suss out the level of talent or potential that each applicant has. You may want to have interviews. You may have them write a personal statement. You may ask them how they took advantage of the opportunities that were actually available to them. You may ask them what types of things would they do in STEM or in their degree program if they're already at your institution, if they had all the time in the world, right? Because often these scholars, because they're so talented, would love to do a million different things, join clubs, go to extra talks, all this different stuff, but they're working or they have family obligations. So there are other things in their way. There are so many different choices. We see so many different ways that proposals capture talent or potential. Just make sure that's what you're actually capturing and that you lay out exactly what you're asking the applicants to submit and give some insight into how you're going to assess it.
Thanks for that. How about this one? The data tables ask for GPA of the scholar pool. My institution does not have information of GPA broken down for low-income students. How can we adequately fulfill this requirement?
You want me to keep going, Tom? Tom, I was waiting to see if Tom was going to unmute. I had tagged
Yep.
this one. There's another related question about breaking down graduation rates across your cohorts.
Mhm.
So one of the things we look for is is the strong participation of financial aid, and in some cases, institutional research, so that you can identify your pool of scholars and validate or verify eligibility. So I encourage you to work together with your financial aid office to figure out who that pool of scholars is, and then have financial aid pass over that list to institutional research to pull that GPA and those graduation rates. That's typically what institutions do.
Can students who have not officially declared a major be given scholarships?
So the quick answer is no, because they need to be officially enrolled in a S-STEM eligible degree program in order to qualify for the scholarships. However, if, for instance, you're at an institution where students aren't allowed to declare a major in their freshman year, if there are other reasonable proxies that you can assign that would allow you to incorporate those first year students. Say, for instance, there is sort of a tracking of people that take calculus into a specific set of degree programs that aligns with what your project wants to accomplish. That can be included as a possible sort of probationary phase for your project.
Okay. Another person asks, I am planning to require STEM activities by cohorting students in a required freshman classes. So these are activities that are already required in their degree plans. Can I require them to be in my particular section of the required course?
I was
Um,
just typing that answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's actually going to depend upon institutional standards. That's a common practice to actually bundle all of your STEM cohorts into their freshman seminar course or whatever it is you're talking about. So as long as institutional policies allow for you to advise them all or advise them, place them all into that aligned section, then sure, that is because it is a required class. You're not adding a requirement for the scholars. You're simply managing how that requirement is fulfilled by the scholars.
But if there are multiple sections of the same class, you cannot drop a student from the scholarship program if they cannot be in that section. So my advice would be let them know that that is a feature, that is an intention, that you think it would be beneficial, but do not make that a requirement because that's an additional criterion. A scholar may have your section may end up being 9 o'clock in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the scholar may end up building their schedule because they have to get their kid to the sitter at 10. And so they start all their classes at 11. That can't be a reason to keep them out. But it is a great strategy, and almost always scholars take advantage of it if there's any possible way they can.
Switching to the topic of the planning period for track ones. Did I hear correctly that scholarships need to start in year one for tracks 2 and 3? Is a year of startup allowable? Can we also have buffer time at the end to allow the evaluator to wrap up their work?
So timing of awards is a bit prickly in S-STEM because awards are made year round. We don't have sort of a band of awards at a particular quarter of the fiscal year. So it's basically you've got to thread a needle. Proposals come in March. Standards of practice at NSF are that you should receive a recommendation within 6 months of the deadline. So we're talking September-ish. Um, that being the case, your start date is likely not going to arrive until mid fall semester. So by default, if you wanted to have a full year of activities, you would be aiming for the fall of 27 for your first cohort of scholars to arrive. So in essence, you are projecting farther down the line. What you don't want to do is say, whenever your start date is, and say you think you're going to get funded in August of 2026. Delaying a year infers to the reviewers and to us that you need time to figure out what you're going to do, which is a bad look in a proposal. So you want to be mindful of how that looks in the review process. But the timing of the program is such that if you started in January, you would have a ramp up for recruitment. The thing that you really want to be attentive to is the admissions cycle for your institution if you're taking incoming freshmen, because the applications come in the fall, the acceptances go out in the early spring, declaration date is May. So if you want to recruit a cohort for a fall semester, you have to think 6 months in advance for how that's going to work.
So this seems like a related question. Just for clarity, can track three proposals have their first year dedicated to recruiting for scholars and planning?
So same question, same
Hmm.
answer. It's a matter of when you sort of intentionally set your start date for the project and how that factors into the recruitment process leading up to the first year of scholars.
Thanks. Should STEM proposals submitted this year use the new data management and sharing plan form that was required in the recently published supplement to the PAPPG 24-1? It doesn't yet seem to be available in research.gov.
They should, and fingers crossed, it will actually be showing up soon in research.gov. That supplement to the PAPG was just published last week. So we saw it for the first time last week as well. So there's going to be a little bit of lag in terms of operationalizing that form in research.gov. It should be there well in advance of the March 3rd deadline. Okay, I won't swear to it, but goodness gracious, it should be.
Switch to like budget questions. Can the budget model include funding to support students enrolled in an accelerated bachelor's to master's program of 4+1 that spans both undergraduate and graduate years? Or is student support limited to either the undergraduate years or the graduate years only?
It is permissible to cross the entirety of the accelerated BSMS program.
During a workshop for scholars, can we use the funding to budget for a meal?
So STEM actually has one particular exemption to the no food rule because NSF actually does have a no food rule for meetings and for intramural meetings and other sorts of congregations. And that is if you are engaging the scholars in a cohort building, cohort development activity, you can support the activity vis-a-vis food, admissions, other sorts of things. Um, for cohort building activities only. You can't buy pizza at recruitment fairs. You can't buy tchotchkes to give out at conventions or the like. You can support scholars who are actively participating in cohort building activities.
And that's only the scholars.
And that's only the scholars. You can't buy food for the faculty. You can't buy food for the families. Only
We
for the
have
scholars.
we have projects that do all kinds of cool stuff. They take scholars to
Yeah,
escape rooms. They go to
right.
sporting events. They go on hikes, all these different types of things. But those funds are for the scholars and
Yeah.
explicitly for cohort building.
Right. And that is a special dispensation because of the requirement for cohort building activities in the solicitation. Since no other activities in terms of recruitment or otherwise are posted in the solicitation, we cannot authorize the use of money for food in those cases.
Tara, there's another question in the chat. Although my Q&A box is hanging up a little bit. I don't know what's going on. It's not letting me dismiss questions after we've answered them, but it's neither here nor there. But it says, can you provide small financial support for a scholar to attend a 3-day event prior to the start of the semester? Because attending could be a financial strain for the scholar. So kind of goes along the lines of what can you spend money on for the scholars? You can absolutely provide a separate stipend for bridge programs, other experiences. Just be aware that that is not something that's part of their cost of attendance. So that has to come out of the proportion of the budget that is not for scholarships. So if you're a track one, at least 50% of your budget needs to go to scholarships. And if you're a track 2 or 3, at least 60% of your budget has to go to scholarships. Something like a stipend for summer research, bridge programs, trips, things like that would be out of the non-scholarship part of your budget. Although it would, in general, still be participant support.
Another funding related question. I see that proposals can utilize non-scholarship funds to provide additional support for scholars. Does this mean students can receive a supplemental stipend on top of the scholarship for engagement and other optional offerings like a sort of advising, mentored research opportunities?
That's a yes. And to Mike's earlier answer, it doesn't count as scholarship. Those are non-scholarship funds that are going to scholars. And so they would not constitute or contribute to the 60% requirement. However, they are completely allowable. They just have to go on a different line item in your budget.
Just remember, stipends are not payment for time. They are reimbursing the scholars for the, sorry, it's not payment per hour. It's not pay. It's a reimbursement for the time that the scholars are putting into this to a training activity. That is NSF's view of stipends. So just make sure that be careful that it's that way, right? So if every scholar at your institution, as part of expectations for maybe a freshman seminar, maybe something like that, has to go meet with their advisor 3 times, you can't then also pay them. You can't reimburse them for the time they spent going to their advisor, because that's part of their cost of attendance. They have to take, if your institution says they have to take the course, and as part of the course, they have to meet with an advisor, you can't then give them an additional stipend to compensate them for the time they could be doing something else instead of receiving that training. So just be careful. But in general, yes.
How about residential summer programs? Are they considered cohort building development activities?
Can be.
If they're credit
But however,
bearing,
this
be
is
careful.
yeah, this is where we get into the you can't require it. And so what is it going to look like if a bunch of your prospective scholars aren't part of that activity and then have to matriculate with a bunch of scholars that are? So there's some things to navigate there.
And just a clarification. So funds for food for an annual meeting for scholars and cohort building cannot be used for the PIs and staff working on the project. So folks would have to use other funds to cover food for PIs and staff, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
My pat answer is you're getting indirect funds out of the grant. Talk to your dean about getting some of that. Just circle back to the department.
How about can funds be used to purchase tickets and transportation for cohort activities?
As long
Yes.
as it is solely for the cohort.
And the word to keep in mind is modest expenditures for cohort building.
Yeah, you're not going to the World Cup on S-STEM.
Yeah, you can't buy season tickets to, the Giants and take all the scholars to, 80, 81 games. Not going to work.
Since we can't mandate that scholars attend or participate in activities such as field trips, can these activities be broadly advertised to non-STEM scholars as well? And can these be organized in collaboration with other groups or programs on campus?
So there's a bit of a danger here because these activities are being selected to serve the needs of the scholars. Now, you can construct them in that manner and then keep the door open for others that might want to participate, but you have to be attentive to how this is going to serve the scholars, not how this is going to serve everybody. And so, um, trying to democratize your approach to the scholars dilutes the prospective impact that your activities are going to have on the scholars.
Can you speak to the breadth and depth of possible cohort building activities which are allowable?
Uh, Not really, because they are as broad as you and your institution can imagine. Now, there's all sorts of standard stuff. You could set up a one-credit seminar that they all enroll in. Uh, Not a fan personally, but you could do that. There could be STEM club activities that you sort of co-opt for purposes of supporting scholars. There's the sort of pre-matriculation orientation boot camp, residential camp that you can try to go. What you want to be mindful of is what is in the realm of possibility for your scholars, because you don't want to create activities that nobody can attend. The other thing is, what do your scholars need in terms of addressing some of the issues and barriers that exist that are keeping them behind, holding them back from their maximum success?
If students are recruited during dual enrollment classes and indicate they will be choosing a STEM major listed as included in the scholarship, can we start the scholarships in high school?
So the problem we run into with dual enrollment is high school students don't fill out a FAFSA form. So there, unless you have them do that, there is no way for you to actually establish eligibility with regard to low income and or unmet need. So there could be exceptions to this, but in general, dual enrollment programs do not rise to the level of S-STEM eligible.
The students would need to be fully accepted into your institution as regular students and have matriculated at least half time to even possibly have it count. Many dual enrollment programs are on a course by course basis. It is not a full admission to the institution as an undergraduate.
Since we cannot provide official cost share, can we put in our facilities and resources document other funding we will use to cover things like food for PIs at meetings or food for students at recruitment events?
I, if it is an institutional resource that you're drawing on, you could put it there. I don't know that addressing food is necessarily dealing with substantive content within a proposal. Um, but yes, you could put it in if there is an avenue by which institutional resources can be delivered in these circumstances, then it is a resource on campus and therefore could go in the FER section of the proposal.
The slides indicate that for track one, the PI must be a faculty member teaching in a relevant STEM discipline or be an administrator who has taught within relevant STEM discipline within the past 2 years. I don't see in the past 2 years requirement in the current solicitation. Could you confirm this requirement?
Yeah, the time requirement for the STEM administrator was taken out of this past iteration. So it is a STEM administrator who has taught in one of the relevant STEM disciplines, period. There is no time constraint there.
If an institution is awarded a Track 3 award, are we eligible to submit an application for a Track 2? And if not, when would we be eligible?
So there's a couple of additional questions that go into a determination here. I'm going to just set up a use case here. If you are talking about supporting the same disciplines that are listed in the Track 3 award, let's just say chemistry, since chemistry is my background, you cannot, well, you could, but it would be returned. You cannot propose to support chemistry students until you have passed the third year of the current Track 3 award. And so basically, you can't have significant overlap of scholarship opportunities for the same tranche of students until you have exceeded the third year of that original award or the existing award.
Could you elaborate on the minimum qualifications for an individual doing the social science research aspect for a Track 3?
You want to demonstrate the same way that we assess qualifications for almost anything, right? You want to make sure that if a reviewer looked at that person's biosketch, and if, they might see that that expertise is evident in the significant products related to the project, things like that. Many proposals, almost all, but not all, include a breakdown of the qualifications of the team in the project description, right? They talk about program leadership team. You can speak to the individual's experience there, right? We are certainly not saying, well, you only count if you have a degree in A, B, C, D, or E. But you need to make a credible case. Certainly reviewers have gone and looked at biosketches and the descriptions of teams and said, boy, they say this person's going to lead this research effort, and I don't see any evidence that they've ever done anything like that before. So you need to be able to make the case.
And an additional query that usually pops up, your proposal is going to set forth a research plan with methodology and theoretical frameworks. If your researcher doesn't have any concrete prior experience in a particular methodology, then it's going to be a tough sell that the research agenda is going to unfold as proposed. For instance, if your research plan relies heavily upon qualitative educational research measurements, your researcher better have experience in qual research methodologies. Otherwise, your review panel is going to go to town on that.
Should the table titled Number of Domestic Low-Income Students with Unmet Need Currently Registered per academic level only include academically talented students?
This is a great question. So I flagged this one because we should talk about a little bit about the solicitation says that you should be using a holistic selection process to determine talent and potential, which means when you're actually looking at applicants and making selections, we want you to do more than just say everybody with a GPA above 3.0 is talented. We're putting the names into the hat and pulling out 10 people. We do not want things like that. You are not looking at the whole student, their experiences, their markers of talent. For this table, because you cannot capture all of those qualitative things in your data systems often and nicely in a table, it is perfectly fine to say, for the purposes of demonstrating our scholar pool, this table includes all students in the degree, obviously in the focal degree programs, with a GPA of 2.75 or higher. So that, or 3.0 or higher, right? While you may end up having some students in there that when you looked at an application, you don't judge them to be sufficiently talented or as talented as other applicants, or there may be some students who have slightly lower GPAs, but there are other markers that would be good enough to demonstrate the rough pool. All right, so yes, we want something that filters them by some measure of talent. Generally, that's going to be a GPA. But we don't want you to just use a GPA when you are actually putting together your selection plan in the proposal and when you're selecting scholars.
So just in case the question was directed in a slightly different vein, because I read it slightly differently. Um, your table of data regarding scholars should point specifically to those students who would be eligible for a scholarship if you had the money today. So they must meet all of the 5 criteria for eligibility. They must be academically talented, low income, with unmet need in an S-STEM eligible discipline, who also meet the citizenship or residency requirements. So in that vein, yes, only academically talented students should be in that data, because what you're telling me is how many eligible students you have right now.
Yes, and this speaks to one of Tom's favorite points that he makes in a lot of these webinars. This program's been around by name for more than 10 years, in other names, in precursor programs that had many similarities for 20. We have a lot of data that says, anecdotal and firm, that says S-STEM is not the way to recruit a large number of students to a program that doesn't already have students. So that is what we are looking for. In the way back, S-STEM programs proposals would come in and they'd look great. They'd have great scholar supports. They'd have a lot of things, and they'd say, and this is going to be what's going to let us get enough. Pick your favorite discipline. I'm a mathematician, math students. And then a year or 2 years later, the PI would come back to the program officer and say, we're really having trouble giving away the scholarship money. It's because the students weren't really there in the first place. So we want to know that the students are there across your footprint of disciplines, so that we feel comfortable that that money is going to, in the appropriate time frame, get into the hands of students.
Thanks for that clarification. Um, is cost sharing allowed for co-PI salary?
I think I know what this question is getting at. But if I'm wrong, please follow up in the Q&A. So cost sharing is not allowed. You cannot say the institution will give a fixed number of dollars to this individual for doing the following things on the proposal, outside of the proposal budget. However, many aspects of being a lead in an S-STEM proposal overlap with people's other jobs, right? So common question we get is, well, my associate dean or my dean is going to be the administrator. They're already on a 12-month contract. We can't pay them anymore. And the question would be, or the justification to make is, yes, well, helping to, grease the administrative wheels to make sure the project is moving forward, talking to their, to their peers, working with other administrative units from their positionality as a dean, is something that they do anyway in a lot of different forms as an administrator. So their jobs on the project overlap with their regular job duties. That's okay. That's not cost share. Just say that. One of the things that NSF changed a few years ago is, if you think of the current and pending support documentation, for each PI and co-PI, you put how much effort they're going to give to the project in each year that the project is supposed to be active. Historically, many, many years ago, before I came to NSF, that was, people generally filled that in only as how much time are they getting paid for on the project. NSF does not want that anymore. They want the total anticipated effort on the project, paid for by the project budget, tied up in their other duties, advising duties, administrative duties, whatever it happens to be. So that's one place. Hypothetically, a reviewer and certainly our team will look at the budget and say, oh, they're not really paying this person. Oh, but I look at their current and pending support and it says they're going to put half a person month of effort in every year. Okay, that number kind of makes sense. The other thing is, if you are not putting any money into the budget for an individual, do not put them in the budget. All right, you don't put them in for $0 for the length of the budget. You discuss their effort on the project in the facilities, equipment, and other resources document. This is a little technical. You can follow up with a question. But if you have an associate dean that's going to be your administrator and they're not getting paid out of the budget, you don't put them in for $0 in the budget. You still put them on the cover page as a co-PI. And you put a description of what they're going to do in the facilities, equipment, and other resources document. And then most likely in the project description as well, when you lay out the qualifications and responsibilities for your team members.
How is the research plan different from the evaluation plan for track one proposals?
So I flagged this one. A couple of things. Track one projects do not require a research plan. So please make sure that if you want to include a research plan, it is allowable, but please make sure that you want to. It is not required of you at the track one level. That being said, I just wanted to address sort of the disentanglement of evaluation versus research. And sort of the simple way to sort of compartmentalize this is evaluation plans inform the project team as to how well the project is working. Research plans inform the broader community as to insights for what could possibly impact scholars regardless of context. And so there's something of an inward versus outward facing delineation between evaluation and research. And that's the sort of short answer. We could talk hours about this, but that's kind of the quick and dirty.
Yeah, and just a reminder, in the beginning slides I presented, our colleagues at MN Associates Inc. will be hosting webinars on evaluation research planning for S-STEM. So please, if you have questions about those topics, you're welcome to join us at those webinars. Should the scholarship amount awarded fully close the gap of the unmet if less than $15,000, or can we consider lower but still significant, such as 60% of average unmet need scholarship amounts, in order to support more students?
So I flagged this one also. And the reason Mike is shaking his head vigorously is the answer, quite frankly, is no. But I wanted to elaborate on that just to explain, or at least kindle further understanding there. Okay. For those of you who are thinking more students equals better, my counter question to you is, how does not supporting a student to the maximum allowable funding vis-a-vis minimizing the amount of loans that student might have to take warrant our consideration for success of that scholar? How is basically shorting the student maximizing their success? Okay, we are not interested in enrollment management problems. We are interested in maximizing the success of individual scholars who are engaged in S-STEM projects. Okay, so please do not make this about maximizing numbers. We want, as much as possible, absolute assurance that each and every scholar engaged in a project reaches the finish line.
Do we need to provide a comparison for the retention rate of STEM and non-STEM peers?
You can, if you want. You can use baselines for current unsupported low-income scholars versus supported low-income scholars for a comparison set too. So you can use historical comparisons, you can use side-by-side comparisons. That's up to you to determine what paints the necessary picture.
You're going to think we're a broken record. I want to reiterate, consider signing up. If you have questions about evaluation, consider signing up and attending the workshops that were dropped in the chat. There are so many ways to do it well. The issue is that so many of those ways to do it well are one block over from a way to put together a very uncompelling evaluation. And this is part of why the technical assistance we want the rec to provide, and they do such a wonderful job of doing it, centers on developing evaluation and research plans. I'll also, just to add, someone asked a question about, hey, can I review for these? We would love, if you're not submitting to this deadline, we'd love to have you review. There will be a survey that should go up in a couple of weeks on the S-STEM page at nsf.gov. The rec will send it around through their dissemination channels. And the reason I bring this up is if you're not on the rec's mailing list, but you're here, what are you doing? Join, sign up. It's a treasure trove. There are a million things you may say, gosh, I'm never writing one of these. The deep dives, there are things that are applicable to applying to supporting low-income students that never end up getting scholarships. And I think you're all here because you care about your low-income students. I know you are. Sign up for the rec mailing list. Check back on the webpage. There's a lot of good stuff that's related to the program and also just related to doing good by your students. I promise Tara didn't slip me a 5 to do a commercial.
Also, there is a question to that effect. The STEM Rec website, which is STEMRec, all one word, .AAAS.org. It is a treasure trove of resources, and for those of you who are looking to see what other projects are doing, they have curated data, they have raw data, so definitely check them out.
Thank you both for the plugs. I just put in the chat again the links to our evaluation and research resources, as well as my colleague Julia's put in the chat a link to our outcomes and impacts report. So we published that not too long ago, and we also hosted a webinar going over some of the major findings of that report. So if you're curious, please go to that webpage and you can view the webinar, you can download the report. We also have a one-pager that highlights the important findings from the report as well. Happily, we were able to host a briefing on the Hill, and I see Diana is actually on the line. Hi, Diana. She joined us as one of the presenters. And yeah, so it's S-STEM is an amazing program, really is life-changing for the scholars that it supports. And we're so happy as the REC to work in partnership with our NSF colleagues and also with our PIs across the country to help bolster the programs nationally and let everybody know about the great work that S-STEM projects are doing. So thank you. Yep. Thank you, Julius. He also put a link to our deep dive reports as well. So these are reports that take a closer look at really important topics related to S-STEM projects, including the one he posted there is scholar identification and selection. The other one we did was forming partnerships with industry. And then our first report we did was around sense of belonging, which is very much crucial to STEM programs in their cohorting, advising, mentoring, and really helping low-income, talented scholars to succeed in STEM.
We have another budget question in the chat that kind of goes along with, we were talking about, budget for scholars and things. So let's say the average current unmet, I'm going to skip the front matter because the meat of the question is this. Let's say the average current unmet amount is $5,000. Can we ask for $10,000 per scholar in case some scholars may have an unmet amount more than the $5,000 average? So here's what we advise. Work with your financial aid folks to determine the average unmet need. And in general, we suggest you budget for that. And here's why. You are not signing a contract that you will get that number of students. Our team, whoever your managing program officer is, the STEM team's pretty big. If you are awarded, we'll work with you. You're going to recruit the scholars you're going to recruit. You may end up recruiting scholars that all need the maximum amount, even if the average is lower. Because it's about talent, not about how much money they need. Remember, how much money they need is not a measure of talent. But we also see sometimes, because these students are so amazing, they get other fellowships, they get other money. So you think you're going to need to give them $12,000, but they went and found other money, they got other awards, and you only had to give them $4,000. That's okay. And if you end up needing to spend more per student than you estimated, you'll just have smaller cohorts and a smaller total number of awards, and that's absolutely fine. Each scholar gets the maximum amount they're entitled to until graduation or transfer or 5 years. Those are the rules. Now, something I suggest, because reviewers ask this question all the time. You're allowed to give up to 5 years of scholarship funds. But often proposals build their cohorts to be 4 years of awards because they have evidence these are talented students. You give them the money, they may only need 4 years. Work with your financial aid office or your institutional research and figure out how many students actually need 5 years to graduate that are in this group. If you have evidence or can make a good faith estimate that, let's say, a third of your scholars will actually need 5 years of scholarships, not 4, build your budget that way. We estimate, here's our intended cohort structure based on institutional data. We estimate a third of the pool of scholars, the third of the selected scholars will require 5 years of scholarship fund. Again, if fewer of them need 5, great. If more of them need 5, we have some mechanisms we can work with you to find supplemental funds to get the scholars you have out the door. All right, that's okay. But use the data you have to be as realistic in structuring your scholarships and your cohorts as possible.
If eligible S-STEM students will also receive a local scholarship based on their financial need, can the project description discuss that in justifying the amount awarded?
So I flagged that one, and as a follow-up to what Mike was just discussing, I need to reiterate, S-STEM is a last dollar scholarship, and it was structured by us to do so because, well, A, we want to ensure that a student is as financially secure as S-STEM can possibly make them. And 2, S-STEM will cover any remittable expenses that fall under cost of attendance. Some scholarship programs are only for tuition, in which case their students would be left holding the bag for room and board, transportation, subsistence, whatever the expenses that your financial aid office has included in that cost of attendance determination. So S-STEM seeks to be last because we are probably the most broad and inclusive in terms of what we're willing to pay for. And so your financial aid office should take all of those scholarships, be they local, national, regional, and fold them in before they determine the unmet need. And once everything else is accounted for and you have an unmet need figure, that is the number that you bring to the S-STEM project.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, and this is part of why we strengthen the language, we had examples of project financial aid offices and admissions offices saying, well, this student will probably get S-STEM, so we're going to use this scholarship incentive over here instead for a different student. If we find out that that is happening, that would be grounds to terminate your project. Do not consider S-STEM when figuring out how to allocate other scholarships. Give them everything they're entitled to. And then if they need S-STEM, give that to them too.
So my state has a last dollar scholarship. What takes precedence, NSF's or the state scholarship?
Hi, Ellie. Um,
Ellie knows the answer to this question.
she
No,
does. The Empire State Scholarship Program, I believe, is a tuition remission program and therefore does not account for room and board, etc. Therefore, S-STEM is the last dollar scholarship in that calculation.
and more broadly, because there are other states where this is in play. If your state will not cede the last dollar to S-STEM, we are willing to do so, provided it does not change the amount of money that the scholar would get. If putting S-STEM first and then adding in the state or doing it in the other order means the scholar gets the same amount of money, for our purposes, that fundamentally means S-STEM is last, even if on paper you need to tell the state, no, the state fund is last. There are a few states where this happens. If it doesn't change the amount of money the scholar ends up with at the end of the day, even if a little less of it or a little more of it is S-STEM, we're okay with that. But always double check. If you are awarded, talk to your program officer about it to make sure they understand. If it's not one of us, they'll check in with us.
Is there any guidance about faculty mentors? Should faculty mentors receive financial compensation and/or other grant-funded resources, or is that at the discretion of the PI?
It's not required. Panelists generally don't love it if you're asking people to take on a big mentoring load and not compensating them in any way. If they are already compensated to do mentoring and advising in other ways, you should mention that. But also, we have no expectation. We have no expectation because there's no rule. Panelists generally don't have an expectation that somebody's getting rich by being an S-STEM mentor, but you should think about some sort of stipend would be my advice. And I saw Tom nodded. I don't know if there's anything you
Yeah,
want to say.
yeah, I'm completely in the same camp. Reviewers are going to reviewers who are oftentimes S-STEM senior personnel are going to question how is this actually going to get done if the mentor isn't getting compensation. And so being cute could actually jeopardize the credibility of what you're planning to unfold.
So none of the activities can be required. What types of cohort building activities can serve all of the scholars? And I'll add, if they're not required, how do you get scholars to engage in them?
Well, that's the $2 million question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you can incentivize things without bribery. That's off the table. So in terms of engagement in certain activities, one example that's popped up a few times is if you can gamify the participation, uh, associate the participation in something like a badging activity or some sort of thing that has a virtual social media component associated with it, you can usually judge the scholars that way. Um, the other thing that you need to be attentive to is, are you scheduling it at a time where it is accessible to the scholars based on where they are in the here and now? So, as Mike said, 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, Thursday, not likely to get a lot of traction with a whole bunch of students. At least wouldn't have worked for my kids when they were in college. Um, in terms of other activities, as I've said on a few other cases, there's no singular solution to what needs to take place. This really is a function of who are your students? What do they need? What barriers are you helping them to overcome? And the activities in terms of cohort building should really focus on those elements of the actual real life students that are in front of you and the empirical data that they provide in terms of, how are you best suited to attack this problem?
And I can't remember if it's on the slide, if it was on the slides now, but it's in the solicitation. We talk about a needs assessment being an important part of crafting an S-STEM proposal. That needs assessment should not just be students aren't passing class A, B, and C. If you can get information by talking to students about what they need, what would help them, what they would enjoy doing to help build some community. And actually, it's kind of funny. We were in a meeting with Tara and Rachel earlier today, planning for another one of these webinars. And I said something that I think is pertinent for this question. The best STEM projects are kind of doing a needs assessment all along through the project because scholars change, the world changes. I mean, it's not always a pandemic either. Things change on campus, things change with availability of local jobs. There's a million different things that can change. There are going to be a lot of things that you, because of your role as a faculty member or an advisor or any number of things, will know that will benefit your scholars. But there's a lot of things that you think they might want that they will tell you they don't really need if you just ask them. And then you have to sort of put those things together. Sometimes they don't realize they need those things, and you have to use your judgment to say, I really think you should give this a try. And that leads me to another thing that is hard to come across in a proposal, but can. The best STEMs focus obviously on the outcome of getting students to their degrees or to transfer and to that next step in their lives. But they really listen to them. They build relationships. They get to know their scholars, right? Mentoring is not pro forma, things like that. We've all built good relationships with students, everyone in this room, I suspect. If you put in that effort, that kind of sweat equity, and you say to a student, look, I know you maybe don't think this is something, but I really encourage you to take advantage of this, to come to this seminar, to try out this research experience, to look at this class. If you build the relationship with them, they're going to listen to you. They're going to trust you. So again, while it's hard to build out in a proposal, yes, the following things will build sufficient trust to scholars so that they will take advantage of all the different parts of our meeting. You can definitely convey that trust building, that caring, that community mindset in a proposal that reviewers will cause them to find it credible that you're going to be able to build that kind of community and relationship. And therefore, the scholars are going to be more likely, not guaranteed, more likely to take advantage of what you're offering.
Thanks for that. If students change their majors over the lifetime of the scholarship but remain in STEM, should the funding stop?
So Mike and I have been having an ongoing conversation about this. So this is a timely question. It's more of an awards management question than it is a proposal preparation question, but still, I think it's helpful to frame the larger context of an STEM project. Students are going to do what students do. If they were to transfer to a STEM discipline that is not covered in the proposal, there's a couple of questions that need to be reconciled. Okay. Is the student going to have the supports to go along with the scholarship if the scholarship money were to follow them? Are there mentors available in that discipline? Would being in that discipline basically undo their participation in cohort building activities? And so the entire wraparound scheme becomes a little bit harder to ascertain. Because we don't want to, basically screw students over, there's a willingness to consider those on a case-by-case basis. And so it's in the realm of possibility. That's a conversation that you should have with your cognizant program officer. What we don't want this to turn into is a license to recruit directly into that new major that just by happenstance happened to capture an SM scholar, because that major program under this scenario was not part of the original proposal and therefore is beyond the scope of what was proposed in terms of the work. Because all of the things about the programs that were included are vetted in the proposal. Do you have enough students? Are the program supports in place? Do you have appropriate mentoring structures? Are there wraparound services aligned with the curricular needs of the students in that major? And so after the fact, if they change, we can have a conversation. But expanding your footprint of majors after an award is made is considerably less agreeable, at least to me. Mike has some other opinions.
Sorry, I was answering another question because we have a lot
Sure.
of them coming in and we're running out of time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Did you want to answer that question live, actually, about the GPA threshold?
Sure. And it says, once you set your GPA threshold, you need to kick them out if they fall below that while in the program. We do not recommend a hard GPA as the sole determinant, a hard GPA line as the sole determinant of retention. Okay, GPAs tell you a lot. They are probably going to play a good role, but the solicitation says that students need to be making satisfactory academic progress. So the trigger to take a closer look may be a student's GPA falling below a certain line, but I would not recommend saying, well, if your GPA is below 3 for a semester, you're out. Because you can have a GPA below 3 and be getting straight A's in your STEM courses and crushing it in your undergraduate research experience and some other things. And maybe you should be more enthusiastic about your composition or humanities classes, and you're not. And there's a good conversation to have as a mentor about the importance of being balanced. But I wouldn't say you're below this line, you're out. Can I answer the question about splitting up other grant sources?
Yes, please.
Just one
Um,
thing to add to the prior
yeah,
question before you go there, Mike. It really behooves a project to have in place anticipated structures for probation in cases where students do fall off of a GPL threshold.
I think we
So
actually require it in the solicitation, don't we?
uh, we probably do. Asking me this late in the day is
Yeah, it's getting
not
late.
going to get you the absolute right answer.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, okay, we're not hard asses here in the S-STEM program. We're here for the students to succeed, and we understand that things happen and sometimes there's a hiccup. So projects that have a clear and supportable probationary mechanism are more likely to be viewed as in service to the scholars. And so, no, my quick answer to the earlier question is no, don't cut them off at the knees just because they tripped up. Find a way to get them back on track. And you can take a semester or other sort of terminology if you're a quarter school or something like that. And explain to the program, yeah, we're anticipating that it's not always going to go perfectly. Here's how we get them back on the train. All right, Mike, go.
Okay, so the question was, let me find it again because I was trying to look. Can faculty split up other grants to award or accept more students in their group if they take funds from other funded students to accept S-STEM students in a fully funded configuration? So the question is, if you have other sources of funding for students, can you use that before applying S-STEM? I believe that is what it is saying. The answer is absolutely yes. In fact, they should get those other sources of funding before they come to S-STEM. But remember, once a student becomes an S-STEM scholar, if they're making satisfactory academic progress, they must receive funding for them until they finish their degree or they hit the 5-year limit. So if you bring in a whole cohort and you're patching together money from some other sources before you apply S-STEM at the end, and then those other sources go away, you're still expected to fund all of those students to the maximum amount. And while we have some mechanisms that we might be able to help you find funding for scholars, that may also mean you need to cannibalize other parts of your budget, including PI salary. So, be careful. Be careful.
The other part of that is You cannot use the criteria for your other grants to assess the
Ah,
ongoing support of the scholars. S-STEM, 5 criteria, that's it. If the other grants have requirements that butt up against our more liberal framework, I'll call it that, you have to stick with the S-STEM framework.
So Tom, I want to give you a minute if you'd like to share like your key takeaway tidbit of advice to those applying to the STEM right now.
So if you've ever had the occasion to meet with me one-on-one, you've heard this before, and I am a broken record in this regard. Okay. S-STEM exists for the students, first, foremost, and pretty much only. Okay. So when framing an S-STEM project, it should always arise from the question, how does this help the students? Now, if you're looking to facilitate your department or your institution because having these scholars would benefit them, that's fine. But that should never be the driver for implementing one of these projects because that's really easy to see through. Okay. And typically not very successful at the proposal stage. Because if you make it about you, you're not making it about the scholars. And first, foremost, and only, we're here to make it about the scholars. Okay, end of my soapbox.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate both of you for taking the time to thoughtfully answer all of these audience questions. I'm so pleased we got through all of the audience questions. Um, please check your, I'm sorry, please, we'll put in the chat a link to allow you to provide feedback on today's event. We really appreciate you taking a second to share your thoughts with us. Um, this will also appear when you exit Zoom today, and it'll be sent to you by email tomorrow. And next slide. It was great to connect with everybody today, and we encourage you to keep in touch with the AAAS STEM Rec. Please visit the Rec website, explore all of the resources, including the ones we shared with you today. Sign up to receive our monthly newsletter, as Mike gracefully pitched, and follow us on social media. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you to Tom and Mike for answering all of our audience questions. We look forward to engaging with you in future webinars and activities, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and best of luck with your STEM proposal submissions. Best of luck, everybody.